Welcome back for another deep dive. This time we're looking ahead to what consumers want from payments in 2025.
Looking ahead is right. And to help us get a glimpse of what's to come,
We've got some great insights from a survey of 1,000 consumers across America.
Yep, it's from NMI. And, our focus today is to help ISOs, PayFacs, and
Software companies.
Figure out how to use this data to really succeed.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. The article highlights some really interesting trends, like the desire for more self-service options, but then also this big focus on security and data protection, demand for flexible payment methods, and you know what? A love for loyalty programs. Let's start with self-service. This is kind of a paradox, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Consumers want more self-checkout, but then at the same time, they say it's the most frustrating payment experience.
I think a lot of it boils down to this tension between what we want and then what actually happens. Consumers, especially I think Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, they love the idea of just getting through the checkout, no interaction with the cashier, done. Easy peasy. Easy peasy. But then you get there and the tech glitches or the interface is confusing or there's nobody to help you. And then what was supposed to be a quick and easy checkout
turns into a nightmare.
It's a disaster.
Right. And NMI's data really backs this up. One of the things, we always talk about how important it is to know your target audience.
Right.
Well, this report actually breaks it down by generation. And, millennials, 67% of millennials and 67% of Gen Z, they want self-service.
Yeah. So that tells you, for our listeners out there, if you're building payment solutions, if you're targeting these younger demographics, you have to nail the self-service. You can't leave them hanging.
Yeah, you really can't. 55% of consumers say they want more self-checkout options. But then on the flip side, 44% say those unattended payments are actually their most frustrating experience. So what's the takeaway here for, the folks listening?
It's not enough to just offer self-checkout.
Right.
It has to be a good experience.
It has to be seamless.
Seamless. So you got to invest in user-friendly interfaces. The tech has to work, and then you got to have some backup, right? A human, someone there when things go wrong. It's about finding that balance between the automation and the human touch.
So true. Okay, let's shift gears a bit to another big theme, security. Not surprising that it's top of mind for consumers, especially as we do more and more digital payments. What did the survey say?
Yeah, so the NMI survey found that 71% of consumers actually want to see increased security, fraud protection, and then 64% are straight up worried about data breaches.
Yeah, think about it. We're sharing so much sensitive information every time we make a purchase, from credit card numbers to personal details. And as we move towards even more biometrics and things,
the stakes get higher.
Absolutely. So for everyone listening, this is a huge deal. Robust security, it's not just nice to have anymore.
But the point the article makes that's interesting is that it's not just about the security itself. It's about communicating that security.
Oh, interesting.
Helping people feel secure. That's just as important as the actual measures that you have in place.
Yeah, because if you're secure but you haven't told anybody, how do they know?
Show them that you are serious about this,
This is what we're doing to keep your information safe.
This is how we're protecting you.
Exactly. Okay, so let's switch gears a little bit and talk about flexibility. So credit cards, they're not going anywhere.
Right.
But the survey also found that people, they really want more payment options, digital wallets, mobile payments, even these buy now, pay later plans.
That's a big shift, from just thinking about what you offer to thinking about what choices your customers have.
Right. And how do those choices fit their lives, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So, and again, 53% of millennials, Gen Z, 49% flexible payment options. Very important.
And keep an eye on those digital wallets, especially with Gen Z. 37% say they're going to be doing most of their transactions that way in 2025.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's a big number.
It is a big number. Okay, so, we talk about all these new technologies coming out. We've got to talk about AI, right? It's kind of the hot topic du jour. But this article shows that people, they're still a little wary about AI when it comes to payments.
Yeah.
So only 26% support AI if it means a faster checkout.
Right.
Which I found really surprising because, Gen Z, you would think they'd be all over that.
Yeah, you think speed would be everything to them. But it turns out transparency is really key.
Yeah.
Only 29% of younger consumers, they would be okay with AI if they knew how and where it was being used.
That makes sense.
So you got to be upfront about it.
Absolutely. And get this, 51% of Gen Z are actually worried about an over-reliance on AI in payments.
So, the takeaway there is don't rush it. Consumers need to be educated about AI. They need to trust it. And that takes time and transparency.
Now, before we wrap up this first part, let's talk about loyalty programs, because this article makes it clear. Loyalty programs, they're still really important.
Oh, for sure.
87% of people, they're more likely to shop somewhere if there's a loyalty program.
Yeah.
And for Gen Z, it's even higher. It's 90%. They love those instant rewards, personalized discounts, the whole shebang.
It tells you that especially for those younger shoppers who are maybe a little less brand loyal in general, loyalty programs, they're key to keeping them coming back.
Absolutely.
I think we should shift a little bit from those general trends to really what it means for our listeners, specifically those ISOs, PayFacs, and software companies working in payments.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, knowing what consumers want, it's one thing, but actually being able to, turn that into something actionable, like that's where it really matters.
Right, where the rubber meets the road. So, let's think back to that self-checkout paradox. For folks listening, one key takeaway is offering self-service, it's not enough. It has to be truly seamless. It has to be reliable. If a customer gets stuck at that kiosk, the frustration negates any of that perceived convenience.
Yeah. Especially, for those that are developing like POS systems and things like that, it's got to be so smooth.
Yeah. And, ISOs, they work with a lot of different merchants. Make sure your merchants understand that. You're not just selling them a product, you're helping them create a good experience.
That's a really good point. And then, we talked about security, just having the measures in place. It's not a lot. The article, really emphasized that you have to communicate that.
Yeah. Transparency is key, and especially for those younger consumers. If you're a PayFac and you're implementing biometrics, for instance, explain that. Explain how it's protecting their data. That can really increase adoption. People need to see that you care about security, that it's not just an afterthought.
And, for software companies that are, building these new payment solutions, baking in that security from the ground up, I think is so important.
Oh, yeah. Don't try to retrofit it later. Start with security as a foundation. That really shows consumers that you're taking it seriously.
Okay, now let's talk about flexibility. So consumers want more payment options. And for ISOs and PayFacs, that means they've got to be able to offer a wider range of solutions.
Right. Think beyond just accepting credit cards. Are you enabling digital wallets for your merchants? Are you exploring those buy now, pay later options? I mean, there's a lot out there.
And I think that's where ISOs can really, help out their merchants, because it's so much to keep track of. And if you can be that partner that helps them understand it all, really valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. And software companies, they can build platforms that can accommodate all these different payment methods.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's really got to be a win-win for everybody. The consumer gets the flexibility, the merchant gets to reach more customers, and the ISO or the software company, they're the trusted partner.
Exactly. Now, let's circle back to AI for a minute. We talked about how consumers are a little wary of it, so it's really important to proceed thoughtfully and transparently. Don't just throw AI at a problem because it's trendy. Use it where it makes sense and make sure it genuinely improves the customer experience.
Right. Like if you're a software company and you're developing, an AI-powered fraud detection system, well, you need to explain how that works. What data are you using? Be upfront about it.
Yeah. That helps alleviate those concerns about data privacy, and it builds trust.
And I think for, ISOs working with merchants, sometimes they might be a little resistant to new technology like that. So education is key. Explain the benefits, address the concerns head on. That can really go a long way.
And finally, we have to bring it back to loyalty programs. They're still a big deal, especially for those younger consumers. They love instant rewards, personalized experiences.
Yeah, it's not just about points anymore, right? So ISOs and PayFacs, they really need to think about what kinds of loyalty programs are going to resonate.
Right. Think about tiered benefits, personalized offers, and seamless integration with the payment systems. Make it easy for people to earn and redeem their rewards.
And, for software companies that are developing those loyalty programs, I think customization is really important. Each merchant's going to have different needs. Their customers are going to be different. So giving them the ability to really tailor that program to their brand, I think that's key.
Absolutely. Especially with Gen Z, they really expect that personalization. They want to feel like you know them, that you're giving them offers that are relevant to their interests.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think there's a real opportunity here for ISOs and software companies to really work together and kind of create those comprehensive solutions. You've got the payment processing side and then you've got the loyalty program side. And if you can bring those together, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, that's a great point. Collaboration is so important in this industry. No one company can do it all. But by working together, ISOs and software companies can really create something special for their merchants, something that benefits everybody.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to kind of end on. We've talked about self-service, security, flexibility, AI, loyalty programs. And I think the real message is that for ISOs, PayFacs, and software companies, understanding what consumers want and then being able to adapt to that, that's really what's going to help you succeed.
Absolutely. The payments landscape is changing all the time, and the companies that can keep up, they're the ones that are going to thrive.
Well, I think that's a fantastic point to wrap up on. And hopefully, for our listeners, this deep dive has given you some things to think about, some ideas for how to navigate this exciting world of payments. So stay curious, stay agile, and keep that focus on the customer. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.